You're listening to The Harmony of We, a space for remembering what we already are together. I'm Greg Kuiper, counselor, author, and fellow traveler in this ongoing field of being human. This podcast isn't about fixing. It's not about getting relationships right. It's about coming into resonance with yourself, with each other, and with the presence that lives in between. This is where the book Relationship, The Harmony of We continues, in breath, in story, and in shared awareness. Hello, and welcome back to this week's episode of The Harmony of We, episode 22, The Gift of Being. Over the past several weeks, we walked alongside Ethan and Maya as they've learned something neither of them expected. That relationships aren't transformed in dramatic moments. They're transformed in ordinary ones. A pause before reacting, or a question instead of an assumption. The willingness to stay when discomfort would rather pull us away. And last week, we stepped back from their story to explore something that quietly lives beneath all healthy relationships: safety. Because without safety, it's difficult to be honest. It's difficult to be vulnerable and to repair. It's difficult to love. Today, I'd like to return to Ethan and Maya. Not because another conflict has appeared, but because life has a way of inviting us into new conversations when we're finally ready for them. And sometimes those conversations arrive through someone else. Have you ever had the experience of telling someone your story, only to realize halfway through that they had already decided what it meant? Maybe they interrupted, or they reassured you too quickly. Maybe they immediately began telling you about a similar experience they had. None of those responses are unkind. Most come from good intentions. We want to help. We want to ease another person's pain or offer a perspective. But every once in a while, something different happens. You begin speaking. The other person doesn't interrupt. They don't hurry your story toward a conclusion. They simply stay with you. And somewhere in that quiet space, you realize something surprising. You feel seen. You feel heard. Not because someone solved your problem, because for perhaps the first time in a long while, someone allowed your experience to fully exist. I think that's one of the greatest gifts we can offer another human being. Every few weeks, Ethan and Maya invited family over for Sunday dinner. It had become a bit of a tradition. Nothing elaborate, usually something simple: grilled chicken, roasted vegetables, fresh bread from the bakery that they loved. The kind of meal that lingered more because of conversation than because of food. This Sunday, Maya's younger sister, Lena, was coming. Ethan had always liked Lena. She had a quick wit, easy laugh, and an ability to make ordinary conversations unexpectedly funny. But over the past year, something had changed, quietly changed. The brightness was still there, it just appeared less often. She had finalized her divorce nearly 8 months earlier. Everyone knew the facts. Very few people knew the experience. Lena arrived carrying a small bouquet of flowers and a bottle of sparkling water. "I brought the fancy water," she laughed. "I figured someone had to." Maya hugged her. "I'm just glad you came." "So am I." For a moment, Lena held on to the hug just a little longer than usual. Not enough for anyone else to notice, but enough for Maya to feel it. Dinner unfolded easily. There were stories and laughter, some childhood memories. Ethan retold the now famous story about the camping trip where he'd accidentally packed coffee but forgotten the coffee pot. Lena laughed harder than anyone. For a while, everything felt light. After dinner, Ethan stepped outside to clean the grill. Maya and Lena remained in the kitchen, the sink filled slowly with warm water. Plates clinked softly. The window above the sink was cracked open, letting in the cool evening air. For several minutes, they washed dishes without saying much. Because sisters sometimes know silence doesn't need filling. Then Lena spoke, quietly. I've been thinking about something. Maya looked up. What is it? Lena kept looking at the dish she was drying. I don't think I realized how lonely I was while I was married. The words settled into the room. Maya felt something familiar, the impulse to comfort, to reassure, to remind Lena how strong she'd been, how much better things were now. But something she'd been learning over these past few months gently interrupted that impulse. She remembered the conversations she'd been having with Ethan, the pauses, the staying, the curiosity. Instead of answering, she simply moved a little closer, laid the towel down, turned fully to her sister, and asked softly, Tell me about that. Lena looked surprised, as though she'd expected the conversation to move somewhere else. Instead, it stayed. For the next 20 minutes, she spoke, slowly telling the story about the strange loneliness of living beside someone who no longer really saw her, about how she gradually stopped sharing parts of herself because they never seemed to go anywhere, about laughing less and dreaming less, talking less. It wasn't that we fought all the time, she said. I almost wish we had. Maya listened. What do you mean? I think fighting would have meant we were still trying. She paused. I think we just slowly disappeared from each other's lives while living in the same house. There was silence, not empty, but sacred. There's something important happening here. Notice what Maya didn't do. She didn't search for the perfect words. She didn't reassure. She didn't tell Lena everything would be okay. She didn't compare it to her own marriage. She created space. Carl Rogers once observed that when people feel deeply understood, they often begin discovering their own way forward. Perhaps that's because understanding doesn't rush, it waits. Sometimes the most healing sentence in a conversation isn't advice, it is, tell me more. A few minutes later, Ethan stepped inside carrying the platter from the grill. He stopped when he saw the expression on their faces. Something had shifted. He could feel it. Without asking what he'd missed, he quietly set the platter on the counter and poured himself a glass of water. Then he joined them at the kitchen island. No interruption, no attempt to redirect the mood. He simply became part of the silence. Lena looked over at him. You know, she said with a smile, I've told people I'm divorced dozens of times. But tonight, she glanced at Maya, I think someone actually heard what that meant. Ethan nodded gently. I think those are two very different things. Lena smiled. They really are. There is a difference between hearing information and receiving someone's experience. One fills our mind, the other touches our heart. When another person feels seen, something inside them relaxes. Not because their life has suddenly changed, but because they no longer have to carry it alone. Following Thursday, Maya arrived home to find an envelope tucked beneath the flower pot beside the front door. Inside was a handwritten note. Thank you for Sunday. I've replayed that conversation several times this week. What stayed with me wasn't anything you said, it was what you didn't do. You didn't rush me. You didn't tell me to move on. You didn't make my story smaller so I'd feel better. You simply stayed with me. I don't think I've felt that kind of listening in a very long time. Thank you. Love, Lena. Maya read it twice, then quietly placed it on the kitchen counter. That evening, Ethan picked it up. He read it slowly. When he finished, he looked across the room. I think we're learning something. Maya smiled. What? He held up the letter. People don't always need answers. They need somewhere for their hearts to land. Maya nodded. I think that's what safety feels like. Sometimes we underestimate what another person is asking of us. We think they're asking for wisdom, solutions, perspective, maybe encouragement. And sometimes they are. But more often they're asking something much quieter. Can my experience exist here? Can I tell you what it's been like without needing to edit it? Can I be fully seen without being hurried toward feeling differently? When someone offers us that kind of presence, it does something remarkable. It reminds us that our inner world matters, that we're not too much, we're not too complicated, and we're not alone. This is one of the deepest forms of attunement. Not simply understanding the words someone speaks, but recognizing the human being who is speaking them. Researcher and psychologist Carl Rogers believed that people naturally move toward growth when they experience genuine empathy, acceptance, and understanding. We don't always need someone to tell us what to do next. Often, we need someone to create enough safety that we can discover the next step ourselves. That kind of listening is a gift. And like all gifts, it can't be forced. It can only be offered. This week, notice what happens the next time someone begins telling you about their day, or their disappointment, or something they're carrying a burden. Before searching for the right response, pause, take one breath, and quietly ask yourself, what if this person isn't asking me for an answer? What if they're asking me to stay? Sometimes the most loving thing we can say is simply, tell me more. Tell me more. As you move through this week, remember that every person you meet is carrying a story you cannot fully see. If someone entrusts you with even a small piece of that story, receive it gently. Sometimes the greatest gift we offer another person is not changing their experience. It's allowing them to feel that they no longer have to carry it alone. The healing lies in the space between us. May you walk in the harmony of we.